mean, how silly is that?
Pulls up three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
Hello. Welcome back to the Hoop Junkie Podcast, the number one sports podcast in the world.
According to us.
I'm your host, Zach, and I'm joined as always by the NBA draft guy himself, Chance Baker. How you doing, Chance?
Man, I'm doing good. I love NBA offseason. I was just telling my wife, I feel like I'm more excited to talk about like the offseason than I was like the finals and the playoffs. It's just kind of a change of pace. It's always going. And I just love diving deep into like teams, their free agency, their cap space, all of the weird nerd stuff that me and you spend way too much time looking into, but it's fun.
Dude, like this is when my thumb is just on scroll mode, like every day. Like it's like I find myself like waking up in the morning, scroll mode. It's like at work, and it's like I'm in a meeting, and I really want to look at my phone. At lunch,
we have
I'm
a
like
little inside joke. Because I work from home, right? So like all day I'm like working, trying to work hard. And my wife, like she works from home too. So sometimes she'll try to talk to me and I'm like, hey, sorry, I'm busy. And then but if there's a notification for a trade, I'm like all in. So now anytime my wife needs my attention, she's like, hey, there's been a major trade. Did you see that? I'll like look at her and she's like, no, can you do this real quick?
oh man, she is wrong for that. She is so wrong. But that is so smart. That is an easy way to get somebody's attention.
Oh yeah, it is. Every single time I'm like, wait, how did you get that? You got Woj's tweets on too?
Yeah, we are legitimate hoop junkies. This is an addiction at this point, Chance. I don't know if we need to go see somebody for it or just accept the fact that it could be a lot worse addictions out there for somebody to have.
Oh yeah, I'll take it. I think it's the best case scenario, so I'll ride on this hill.
Man, so look, Chance. So we had an NBA draft this past week, right? It was an exciting draft because I think this was one of those years, right, where you had a very deep draft by all standards, and you also had a very important draft for a lot of teams, right? Because this draft it basically tells us how things are going to go in free agency from a lot of teams' standpoint. Now, what were some of the things that happened in the draft, Chance, that you were like, I like that move for this team, or maybe a team that did something that left you in questions?
I think I'll start with your Dallas Mavericks. I really like what they were able to do. Lively, it seems like by all reports, that was their guy at 10. And for them to be able to get off Berton's contract and drop down to 12, I really like that move. They basically get their guy still, but also unload a little bit of salary, which in you guys' situation, like getting off any kind of contract like that is a benefit.
And dude, can we say like all, going back to the end of the season, and and I'm glad, this is why I love having a podcast, because I can put these opinions on wax. And when everybody was hating on Dallas for tanking those last couple of games and was like, I don't understand why they're tanking. I don't understand. And you and I were like, Dallas would be a fool.
Sense.
Yeah, Dallas would be a fool if they don't lose these games, because this is exactly the move that they needed to do. They needed to, it was about, yes, it's about getting talented players that can help Luka and Kyrie roster, right? And they did that by going out and getting athletic defenders, by getting a rim protector in Lively, and then getting a guy in Omax who was supposed to be a lockdown defender from a perimeter wing standpoint, which this team has been missing since they lost Dorian Finney-Smith in the trade for Kyrie. So from that standpoint, yeah, we could talk about that. However, I got to tip my hat to Nico Harrison, because he did exactly what was needed to be done. When you've got a roster that is in this win now mode, when you got Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving on it, and you need to compliment them, you do that. But then you also utilize your draft position by getting that 10 pick to dump some of that salary, and now it makes Dallas have a little bit of room in free agency with opening up that full mid-level exception, which I think that's huge for this team. And then also, Chance, by you able to go turn one draft pick into two, I think that also helps his roster because due to the Porzingis trade, due to the trade of Kyrie Irving, and then even the trade of Luka Doncic, this Dallas Mavericks team has been very limited on draft uh, compensation, right? So
Yep.
like they've got to really utilize these drafts. I mean, last year they drafted. Ended up making the trade to get Jaden Hardy, and then Jaden Hardy, his rookie year, he looks like a very promising young guard. And then a couple years prior to that, going out and getting Josh Green. Man, I remember all through Dirk's career, the Mavs were terrible at drafting, but
Yep.
but going from that to now, these past few drafts, bringing in Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson, Josh Green, Jaden Hardy. Man, you could say like I got to tip my hat just overall to the Mavs front office for the direction they're headed in because they've really set themselves up to do some more dangerous things this offseason and free agency.
Oh yeah, agreed 100%. Just kind of looking back at the draft, couple other winners. I think the Thompson twins are big winners just
Yeah.
in general. How cool is that they go
What
back to back in the top 5?
Dude, and they were just so happy, and it was cool just seeing, like, they had like the biggest table over there, man. Like
Yep.
you got two brothers, like their whole families there. Man, that's just such a cool story to see that, and like Chance, like this whole, I don't know if it's just me getting older, but like man, I was getting kind of emotional, man. Just like seeing all these young guys that have worked so hard for this goal, and like now, like going from situations where, well, obviously, it's the NIL too. Like these boys, they ain't broke like they were back in the day. But seeing their lives like change overnight, man, was really getting me where. And you really saw a lot of emotion in this draft, and it was, and then with the Thompson twins, man, you saw a lot from them too as well.
Yeah, and it's just awesome because when you're a twin brother, so Amin went first, fourth to the Rockets, and so like it's hard for him to really fully enjoy it until he knows like his brother, who's projected a top 7 or 8 pick as well, goes, and so for him to go right after, I think that's just really great for both of them. You had the family out there answering questions. And I think the teams that they went to, Houston, they, just have nothing but athletic guys. And for those that don't know, Amin Thompson is definitely one of the most athletic guys in this draft. And they were just going to be flying up and down the court between him, Jalen Green. They have a lot of other young assets, and we'll get into, what their offseason plans could look like later on in a bit. And then for Detroit, getting Asar Thompson, who's probably a better shooter. He actually looked like a pretty good shooter towards the end of the year. Not as good of a playmaker, but another great athlete as well. Paid him with Cade, with Jaden Ivey, and you got Duran and Wiseman, 2 athletic bigs. They're both going to be a lot of fun to watch. So really, really happy with them, their landing spots. And Houston in general, they get Amin Thompson at 4. Another guy they were considering at 4, they were able to get back at 20, which was Cam Whitmore, who was the biggest surprise of the draft, projected potentially top 4 or 5 pick. A lot of people had him as a 3rd or 4th best player in this draft, and he falls all the way down to 20. There are a lot of speculation on why this happened, but what were your thoughts as you see Cam Whitmore just continue to slide further and further down the board? I know you mentioned, the Mavs looking at him at number 10 if he were to even fall there. So we thought for sure he'd be a top 10 guy.
I mean, dude, yeah, I was like, hey, Dallas, look, if he falls this low, go get him. I mean, I'm very similar to what happened with Jaden Hardy, but hey, ending up with two first round draft picks and then bringing in Rashawn Holmes and dumping Bertans' contract, I'm not complaining about that. However, the Whitmore thing was so surprising. Have you seen any reports as to why he slid that far?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different things. So one is the medicals. Apparently he has, he missed a lot of time, and there were concerns about his knee that was more of like a long-term issue, and like they don't expect him to have like a fully long-term career. And obviously, we don't know the details of this, but I've heard a lot of medical talk, and that's a big reason why he slid. I also have heard that he didn't interview particularly well. Gary Parrish is a local guy, kind of covered that on the CBS College Basketball, and he didn't really like go into detail, but like he kind of hinted like in his body language, like there's some stuff on there. Like I'm not going to get into it, but like, there's definitely a reason why he slid that, had to do with how he interviewed with teams. And then part of it too is like when a guy's expected to go top 5 or 6, if you're a team that's picking, early to mid lottery, even late lottery, and, even all the way down to like the 15th to 20th pick, you don't have much of a scouting report on this guy because you never expected him to be there. So when he drops out of the top 10, then these guys picking 11th all the way through 19th and 20th, they weren't even planning on him. So they have no knowledge. It's like me or you trying to just draft somebody on 2K and we did no scouting or anything. And so we're like, wait, do I take a risk on this guy? Like everybody said he was really good, but why did none of these teams get him? And so then they're like, we're going to stick with our board. They asked Dunleavy about it from Golden State. They picked him 19th, or they picked Pods 19th and let Whitmore slide to 20. And he was like, oh yeah, we just went with the best player on our board. And like, he didn't go into any other detail. So there are a lot of factors from, personality. I also heard that his coach didn't really go to bat for him at all. Which is kind of weird. Typically, as a college coach, they are going to be like, oh yeah, he's great because they want to, influence future recruits. And so there's a lot of off the court issues. On the court, he's amazing. He's, kind of a Miles Bridges, like, he's so athletic. He can shoot as well, get to wherever he wants on the court. So I think if it works out, pairing him along with Aman Thompson, like they have a very athletic set of wings there, but the off-court stuff is a concern. But when you get him at 20th, that really lowers your risk, right?
That's great. That's great value. And then for Houston, like you think about it, like they've already seen him, So because they've already, I'm sure they scouted him because they had one of those high picks, and you look at it like them, a young rebuilding team. It's a high risk, low reward. High reward, low risk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. I mean, once you get past pick 15 or so, like you're just
It's
really hoping. You're hoping for two things. Like you're hoping either like what the Nuggets like to do, like with Christian Brown and the guy they got from Gonzaga. Like they're trying to draft guys that are like low ceiling, but they can help you win, in the next year or two on their rookie contract. So like that's one route you could go. Or you're hoping that you just get a guy that has a super high potential. He might be nothing, or he might be, the next great value out of the draft. We've seen a lot of guys that end up going that route. They go, into the 20s and they end up having great superstar careers. And so you're really trying to hit one of those two.
NBA champion Michael Porter Jr., same thing, right? He slid because people had a lot of questions about his health, which his health has still been a concern in his career. However, overall, his talent definitely is much higher than where he was picked. But it was all just because of him sliding on draft day due to his medicals.
Exactly. Yeah, so, he fell like 18th or so. So this is a very, very similar situation outside of, additional like interview possibilities that messes up too. But once you get to 20th, you're just hoping that you either, if you're going to go with a risk, like, he might not pan out, but how many picks in the 20s don't pan out? So there's not much of a risk there.
Mm-hmm. Chance, something else I kept my eyes on too in this draft was the Kings, man. What are the Kings up to? So they made that trade with Rashawn Holmes, and then they've got Harrison Barnes rolling off of their books. Dude, they freed up like $35 million in cap space.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be players this summer. They're one of the teams that'll be most interesting to watch in the offseason. They had this out of nowhere year led by Sabonis and, some of their sneaky pickups like Herter. So they're still like one or two moves away because the West is so deep and everyone in the West is trying to get better. The Kings are in a situation where they have to try to keep getting better too. You can't just say, oh, we had a great year. We were the 3 seed or whatever. And, we got bounced early, but we're going to do internal development. Like you still have to be aggressive. And it seems like the Kings are going all in. They'll probably end up losing Harrison Barnes, and we'll see what they try to do to replace him. But they've got some moves up their sleeves, and I'm curious to see how they spend that money this summer.
Mm-hmm. Any other takeaways from the draft? I know one. I got one. The Wizards, that trade they made with Indiana to go out and get I don't know how to say that guy's name, Bilal
Coulibaly.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, getting him, I think by all reports is that he's a project, right? But he has a high ceiling. So like the Wiz being able to make a trade like that, I mean, if you're them, I mean that's a solid bet, right?
Yeah.
So you made the move by taking CP3's contract that you got in the Bradley Beal trade and flipping him for Jordan Poole. Man, I know Jordan Poole gets a bad rap, but for a Wizards team who is not necessarily in win now mode, but you want to entertain your fans and be somewhat competitive, and a young team, I actually like the moves that the Wizards are piecing together.
Yeah, I love the pick as well. That was Wembanyama's teammate over in France, and so this guy was like 5'10" going into the back half of his high school career, and then he suddenly shot up to like 6'8" over the past 2 years, and they think he might still be growing. And he's like a OG Anunoby type, very good defender, really athletic, and his scoring has come a long way as well. So I like the pick. I'm with you. I think the Wizards are in no rush. They've got Jordan Poole. He can go average 30 a game if he really wants to, especially with Tyus Jones just feeding them with 10 assists per game, all to Jordan Poole. So, I mean, they'll try to put together a team that's fun to watch. Getting an athlete like that will, keep some fans in the seats, and they have no intention of winning now. So if he's a project and he takes a couple years to develop, even better for them. They obviously are setting up a huge rebuild with the moves they've made, and so I think that's a great fit to fit their timeline.
Mm-hmm. All right. So outside of draft news, Chance, so we got free agency coming up.
Yep,
right?
Starts Friday, right? So it starts, I guess, technically Thursday night. I guess we'll start to see all the news pop up because teams don't do anything until midnight, right? They respect the rules, but suddenly at 12:01, all these deals will go down. So they just negotiate really, really quickly. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, in prior to free agency, we got one of our, I guess, we got a finally, John Collins got traded.
After 3 years, it's finally happened.
He finally got traded, man. He got traded to the Utah Jazz for Rudy Gay, who I honestly, even though we cover all of these games, it was a piece of me that had thought Rudy Gay had retired at the end of this season. But apparently Rudy Gay is still alive and he is still playing basketball. And so he got traded for John Collins, which is a clear salary dump thing. And I think what you're really starting to see, a chance, is the ramifications of this new CBA coming into effect, right? Where teams are like, look, I don't care. Let's just get them off of our books and move forward, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think for them, it's a clear salary dump. Collins is making about 20 something million for the next 3 years. So they're clearly just trying to get off of that. I don't think Atlanta is done yet. So, yeah. And it's interesting. Rudy Gay, I've heard somebody else on another podcast, like, I didn't even realize this guy was still in the league. So, it's kind of funny. And it's all ramifications of the new CBA. One of the downsides to that is the Jazz actually had like $47 million in cap space going into the summer. But now with this trade, that drops them. So they were considered to be, potential players. But that's what's going to happen with the new CBA. You're going to have to unload assets to get teams to take on bad contracts. And now these teams that have a lot of cap space, instead of going out and signing a big free agent, I think you'll see a lot more of this where they'll be like, hey, trade us your bad contracts, but give us a pick or two to take on this bad money. And that's how we're going to allocate our cap space as opposed to signing free agents. I think with this new CBA, and it's already kind of been this way anyways, I think actual free agency signing is going to be a lot more rare as far as like big names. I think it's going to be a lot more like signing guys to big contracts and then trading them off, a year or two later. And so I think that's going to be a lot more prominent, especially with the new rules and restrictions. But for Atlanta, they were a luxury tax team. You don't want to be on that second apron, especially if you're not a contender and you're a team that's scraping by to get in the playoffs like Atlanta is. Like, that's the worst place to be, as a first round exit team that's paying in the luxury tax. Like, you just can't be there. If you're going to pay the luxury tax, you have to be a contender. So this is a clear move for them to get back down. They're not a salary cap team anymore per se, but they're still at least under the luxury tax. They get the full MLE and it opens up more flexibility. And I don't think they're done yet either.
Well, Chance, one thing that a lot of people forget is that cap space is great, but cap space at the end of the day is still just cap space. Like, if you don't really have any plans to spend that money on any major players at a certain point in time, like, you got to make deals. Like, the Utah Jazz were not going to sign anybody of John Collins' caliber this offseason through free agency. So this was a good way for them to acquire more talent, in which I'm kind of like concerned on how he fits on that team. However, look, this team is not in its final form. So you go out and get somebody like a John Collins, and hopefully you can revive his career and maybe flip him for pieces later, right? Because you know how it'll go. It'll be a team at the trade deadline that's in a situation like, we need one more piece to go for it.
Yep.
Let's go ahead.
Collins,
Let's go ahead and trade draft picks.
Exactly.
Or
Like
what?
Collins is a guy that could be valuable at the deadline, like you mentioned. And biggest thing for him, and I think we've talked about this before, is his finger injury that completely wrecked his shot. Like he was a guy that
Mm-hmm.
could flap and down the court, rebound, finish around the rim, but also spread you out and hit threes. And that made him a decent fit next to Capella because he could spread the floor. And then he has this crazy hand injury. And if you haven't seen it, you can Google like John Collins finger, and it just looks absolutely insane. I don't even know how he plays basketball with this. And so you saw his shooting numbers tank. He was a 40% 3-point shooter. I think he was like 28% this past year, and it's basically to that injury. And so if there's any way he can find a way to either find some doctor that can fix his finger or figure out how to at least shoot at a decent level, he could be very valuable. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's an interesting fit, especially when they just drafted Hendricks, who's another big man as well. But at the end of the day, like you just want, assets. And if they can flip later on, you can always do that at the deadline as well.
So, Chance, players that didn't get moved at the trade deadline, I mean, excuse me, during the draft, who everybody was watching for, Dame Lillard, Zach LaVine, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Zion Williamson, all those
Yep.
guys stayed pat. Were you surprised that none of those guys moved after hearing all of those guys' names for weeks, in some cases months, in some cases years?
Right. I was a little surprised. I thought we'd get a little more fireworks, especially with how the day started. But yeah, at the end of the day, it all depended on the draft in Charlotte went to, and there's all the smoke screens. Are they going to go Scoot? Are they going to go Brandon Miller? They end up going Brandon Miller, which means, okay, now it's time. Like, is Portland going to trade Dame, take Scoot, or are they going to trade the pick and, try to get win now players? And they didn't either. They drafted Scoot, but they still have Dame as well. There's the report that I guess Dame met with the front office and they're still trying to build a winner around him, but they've got all these young guys now. So they're kind of at a standstill where it's like, Dame kind of feels like it's probably best to move on, but he doesn't want to be the one to say it. And the franchise probably thinks that they need to initiate a rebuild, but they don't want to be the team that traded Damian Lillard. And so it's kind of like at this standstill now where I don't know how long that's going to go, but definitely expected something to happen there. And then, all the other guys, they've been on the block for a while. So we'll see what happens in the future.
Dude, you know what it sounds like? How long have you been with them? What, 10 years now at this point? It sounds like someone that's been married for a decade. And they're like, we're not really in love anymore, but,
We're just
I don't
kind of
want to be
going through
the
the
one.
motions. Yeah.
You don't want to be the one. Let's
Like,
just.
we don't want to upset the kids, like the fans. They love us, so we'll just do it for them, and we'll ride it out. And then 10 years later, somebody will cheat, and it'll be forced to go at that point. That's kind of where they're at right now.
Yeah, man. It's hopefully they figure it out because when you see all this stuff like it's all this smoke and mirrors in the news cycle about Damian Lillard, and this is what I have always said. It first started out where teams were where these news cycle would always be, well, Dame should leave, Dame should leave, Dame should go somewhere, and Dame would always consistently say, "I want to stay here in Portland."
Yep.
That was his thing. But now I kind of think things have changed because I really feel like Damian Lillard would not, a lot of these stories wouldn't be what they are if Dame hadn't been feeding into them of late. Like by saying things like, well, I don't want to be here for a rebuild, and being adamant about it. And then also letting all these stories go off. So I truly do believe that Damian Lillard, at his heart, he wants to go somewhere else, but he just is so hung tight on being quote unquote loyal because he set up this ridiculous precedence for himself, right?
Yeah. I mean, how many rap songs and rap lyrics does he have about being loyal to his team? And like that's his whole persona is being loyal to Portland. And I admire it. We don't see that very often in today's NBA where guys are jumping ship all the time left and right. And so I respect it. But at the end of the day, like, you want to do what's best for you. You love Portland. You love the community that you're in there and you love the organization. But Portland is clearly like kind of at a crossroads where they're most likely shifting towards a future build with Shaden Sharp, Anthony Simons, and they just drafted Scoot Henderson. Like these guys are not ready to go out and make a deep playoff run right away. Dame's pushing 33 this year. Like he's clearly only got a couple really good years left, even though he just had perhaps his best season of his career numbers wise. He's ready to win now. And so if Portland is going to commit to build around these young guys, like something's got to give. My guess is that it kind of lingers into the season. Maybe they try out and see how it works with Dame and Scoot. And then maybe at the deadline, then they decide to make a push. There's really only a couple teams that I think would be viable for Dame. but definitely expected to see some fireworks there. Zion was another one I was interested in. I thought these two teams could have even worked together if Portland wanted to flip Scoot, the number 3 pick, and maybe get Zion and try to build around there. Nothing ended up happening with that one. So what'd you think about, Zion with the Pelicans? Do you think they're kind of standing put?
Man, because to me, it makes no sense for them to try to trade him right now. I think you try to give it a go with him fully healthy next year and see where you're at. Because while Zion was on the court, let's not forget he was baby Shaq for a while. Like he was unstoppable. So we never really got to see this Pelicans team, this variation of this team, consistently healthy together. So like if I'm the Pelicans, I'm like, hey, look, this is our last ride with this, just because of all of the drama around Zion Williamson, all of the health issues. If something goes off this year, then I would look to trade him this next upcoming summer.
Yep. I think so too. I think they could be more likely to trade someone else at this point, like maybe Brandon Ingram or someone like that. But with Zion, like you said, if he's on the court, he's a top 10 player in the NBA. It's just, and obviously he's had the whole offseason drama that didn't do him any favors as well. But I'm with you. I think you ride it out at least one more year and see how things go from there, and then you can decide.
Dude, you see Mariah Mills? Apparently she got a tattoo of Zion's name on her face.
No, I didn't see that, but
I'm pretty sure I saw that on Twitter somewhere. Because I think Elon finally banned or blocked her off Twitter or something like that. But it was getting ridiculous. But I saw somewhere that I think she may have got his name tatted on her face, and I'm like, if I'm Zion, I'm suing her for harassment or
defamation,
all of that, man. Because I'll be like, man, I'm tired of seeing you in my mentions.
It's a never-ending story. I can't wait for next week so you can give me the new latest on the Mariah Mills situation.
Man, yeah, Nick, I got you next time, man. But look, Shane, so moving into free agency, what teams are you expecting to be active? Which players are you looking at for movement wise? Just what's on your mind headed into free agency on Friday?
Yeah, so there's 8 teams currently that are going into free agency with cap space. So the Houston Rockets, they're basically the trendsetters. They lead the way. They'll have $60.9 million in cap space.
That's crazy.
Originally, it was thought that they were going to make a big run at Harden. I've kind of seen those talks die down a little bit. It sounds like they're more looking to kind of spread that out, maybe get a couple different guys at this point. But they're basically the leaders. They kind of, will determine the board from here because they have such a huge gap as far as like how much money they can offer. So they can pretty much go, make an offer for whoever they want, whether that be Harden or, maybe somebody else. Hardjoy, the main star at the top of the board right now, but there are other teams with space as well. Utah, they actually had close to $50 million as well, but with the John Collins trade, as we mentioned, that's basically their big free agent signing within a trade. So depending on some player options, they could have some space as well. The Spurs will have close to $40 million. Do they decide to go get some veterans to try to make the playoffs first year with Wemby, or are they standing put? The Kings, we talked about them a little bit. They'll have about $35 million in cap space. So definitely see them being active, trying to take another step up. And then some other teams, Pacers, Pistons, Magic, and Thunder, all will have some amount of cap space. So they're the teams that'll lead the way. But I also do think a lot of this is going to be a lot of more sign-in trades, teams that are being a little more flexible with how they're going to acquire players, because as you mentioned, it just gets really hard with the salary cap to go out and sign players exclusively. So really curious to see how that goes. As far as players go, I've got my eye on the Draymond situation. I think he'll end up staying in Golden State, but does some team make a crazy offer for him? Maybe even a Sacramento. We've seen some talks about pairing him with Sabonis, kind of like they did with Kevon Looney.
He would be perfect in Sacramento.
I think he would too. I think with their play style.
Dude, I think that that would be a huge add, and it would really, I think that would really make them some. It would put them in the contender status. Just because the things that Sabonis can do and the things that Draymond does, I think they really complement each other's game from an interior perspective. But it looks like, dude, it looks like Steph Curry has got him on his hook and is like, dude, you're not going anywhere until I'm gone.
Yeah, I think with the Jordan Poole trade, like obviously they weren't both coming back, Draymond and Poole, so I think they kind of made their decision there. I'd expect Draymond back, but I do think the Kings would have been a great fit. People talk about the fit with him and Sabonis, two non-shooters, but there's two arguments against that. So one, Draymond starts with Kevon Looney now. It's not like he plays with a stretch five right now, and they still make it work. And Mike Brown is, very similar philosophy to Steve Kerr. So I don't think that would be an issue. And two, Sabonis is actually not as bad of a shooter as he played down the stretch, but people forget he literally had like a fractured thumb. So like his whole mechanics was awful down the stretch, and that impacted his game as well. So I think it could be a better fit than people realize. But at the end of the day, I expect him to stay with Golden State. Kyrie, you guys are re-signing Kyrie, right? Is that pretty much
Yeah,
out of the
I don't
question?
see. I don't really see much movement on that. I don't think any, as far as teams bidding on him, I don't really see it a marketplace for Kyrie at this point.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Chris Middleton, he opted out, but I expect him to sign more of a long-term deal with the Bucks. We've kind of touched on that,
But you
but
know
there are
what
a
I
lot
do
of
see? Brooke
what's that?
Lopez. I think
Yep,
Brooke Lopez is to be had
I
because
think so too.
it's like, because here's the thing: they're going to have to cut a deal for Chris Middleton, and it's going to be a number on Brooke Lopez, and it's just a matter of, are they going to be able to get that? Because you've seen reports out there that Houston is actually one of the landing spots for Brooke Lopez, because Houston is looking at potentially bringing in like a Dylan Brooks and a Brooke Lopez this offseason to surround around all their young guys.
Yeah, I like that. I think both of those moves would make sense. As a Grizzlies fan, obviously I've had my issues with Dylan Brooks in the past, and bring him to a locker room full of young guys that don't really have their head on straight, that could be questionable. But at the end of the day, he's a great, perimeter defender, great wing defender, and you pair him with a guy like Brooke Lopez, two guys that have made deep playoff runs before. Brooke Lopez has a title, and I think you need somebody like that to surround some of these young guys. So I think both of those would be great fits along with all these athletes that they got. So like we said, Houston, they're going to be the market leaders, and those are two guys that would, I think, really benefit them to kind of reshape the culture that they have. Obviously, with Udoka, they'll have a fresh voice that can try to get guys in the right direction. But yeah, I think that'll be a good one to keep an eye on for sure.
Mm-hmm. Vucevic is out there
Yep.
on free agency. It's a hard thing because he plays a certain type of style that a lot of teams are kind of moving away from a little bit, from their five man. A lot of teams are wanting these guys that are more mobile on defense, and
Mm-hmm.
Vucevic is not that.
Right.
However, from a center spot, you can almost guarantee that Vucevic is going to get you anywhere between 15 and 25 points a game, easy.
Yep.
And he's going to rebound the ball a little bit too as well. So he's still a very valuable get, but I just don't necessarily know, out of all the teams with cap space, which team makes sense for him.
Yeah.
And it might be a situation where, okay, he goes back to Chicago, maybe on a short-term deal, like signs like a 1 year, $25-30 million deal or something like that, back in Chicago. But other than that, I really don't know where else Vooch would be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the teams with cap space, unless Houston, doesn't make a run at Brooke Lopez, or that falls off, I could see maybe Houston just wants a guy that can get buckets down low. That could be a situation, but none of these other teams really make sense to me. So my guess would be he does sign back for the Bulls for maybe a short term deal, like you mentioned, and then try again as the salary cap continues to rise. These deals keep getting bigger. Maybe he just takes some short term money and tries again here in a couple of years. But there's a lot of like mid-level guys that, there's a lot of teams that will have their full mid-level exceptions. So we'll see a lot of that getting thrown out there over the next couple of weeks as well. And then, I think there'll be a lot of, sign and trades in general. And I think that's really where, a lot of the action is going to be, is teams helping each other out, whether that be like Dylan Brooks getting a sign and trade so the Grizzlies can get a couple assets. There'll be a lot of situations like that, as opposed to these like outright free agent signings, and so few teams have space at this point.
Look, well, Chance, I'm pumped for Friday coming up. So we got some action, man. Hopefully we can my Mavs can end this Kyrie fiasco and re-sign him. You see Kyrie's going back to number 11 this year. Tim Hardaway Jr. is moving to number 10, and they got Derek Lively at wearing Kyrie's old number 2. So
Big things happening in Dallas.
Yeah, big things happening in the D. But anyways, I'm excited to see free agency. But Chance, look, until next time, we'll holla at ya. Peace.